We will start by providing a response to one of the key particle problems in this theme. One that concerns a lot of people is how devils enter. How do they enter into the lives and personalities of humans? Note: in this video, there will be a lot of real-life experiences and examples. Also, many parts of this will be first-person narrative. Number 1. Call occult background. Put another way, there has likely been some occult participation in your family's past. It truly becomes clear that you're dealing with false gods when you discuss the occult. The first 2 commandments, which are the fundamental ones, have been broken. You must worship no deity except myself. You are not allowed to erect any graven images for worship. Any type of idolatry exposes a person to demons by default. The Lord promised to punish the 3rd and 4th generations for their ancestors' crimes in relation to those 2 commandments. Although it is said in relation to the first 2 commandments, I don't think it has much to do with the other commandments. Therefore, there is a doorway for bad spirits to enter your life if your father, grandpa, great-grandfather, or any other comparable relative was involved in the occult, a false religion, or idolatry. That's not fair, one may exclaim. Well, the devil isn't fair, that much is true. However, you should know that nobody is criticizing you for having the issue. You will only face condemnation if you refuse to accept the solution. That is the source of criticism. Number 2. Personal occult involvement. At this moment, I believe it would be best if we read scripture. I'm not sure if you've heard this expression in English, but it goes like this: he who sups with the devil must use a spoon with a long handle. I would want to inform you that there isn't a spoon available that has a handle long enough to allow one to safely eat with the devil. He grabs hold of you above the elbow as soon as you offer him your little finger. The occult is just not something that can be safely pursued. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, says Deuteronomy 18:10-12. That is, sacrificing your kids in an oven as a living sacrifice to a pagan deity. I want you to recognize now that the other things that God commands you to do are categorized in the same list as offering your children to a pagan god as living sacrifices offered by fire. It is forbidden for anyone to make their son or daughter pass through fire, to conduct witchcraft, to be a soothsayer, or to be a fortune teller. Other prohibited behaviors include interpreting omens, practicing sorcery, conjuring spells, practicing mediumship or spiritism, or calling up the dead. That is a really extensive list. I believe that all occult practices are covered because everyone who engages in these actions displeases the Lord. There are a lot of Christians who only fool around with horoscopes and believe that it is harmless. Under the law of Moses, you would have been executed if you had dabbled with horoscopes. That's how God feels about that kind of commitment. Number 3. Prenatal influences. Events that transpire during your time in your mother's womb. During that stage of life, a lot of people experience an evil spirit entering them. Rejection is the most frequent cause alone. A mother harbors resentment toward the child she is carrying. It's going to be embarrassing if she wasn't married, or perhaps there is a rift between her and her spouse. The family has to bear the strain. Alternatively, perhaps their financial circumstances make it challenging for them to provide for the kids. That small life that is beginning inside her womb, however, is quite sensitive to attitudes, so she only feels resentment towards it. It is a person, not simply a fetus, and it already has an attitude of rejection when it emerges. Alternatively, a pregnant woman could go through a shock or a scary time. When she gives in to her fear, the fear spirit enters her and has the choice to remain in either her or the unborn child she is carrying. Do you realize that it might find it more convenient to remain in the newborn stage? Therefore, the spirit of fear is born into the newborn, Let us read you a passage from 1 Peter 3 that gives spouses wisdom and that most people overlook. I only want to highlight this particular facet of it. Informing spouses that Sarah's attitude toward Abraham serves as a model for them in the Bible, I'm not overstressing this, should not make them anxious. 1 Peter 3:6. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. You have to be able to withstand the unexpected jolt of terror in order to be a daughter of Abraham. I believe it is abundantly clear that women are more susceptible than men to unexpected fear or terror. Once more, I've dealt with a lot of cases when people needed to be delivered because their mother had experienced a shock while they were still in her womb. A further intriguing observation is that during my full-time ministry days, or to put it another way, at a period of greater engagement than I currently experience on a daily basis, I observed that a significant number of Americans within a particular age range appeared to be in need of release from rejection. Perhaps they were all born at the same time period, I started to wonder. I then started asking, what era were they born in? I also learned that they were born in the midst of the Great Depression. I reasoned that the mother was already struggling to provide for 6 months and was now expecting her 7th kid. Even though she is a good lady, the next child is born with a spirit of rejection because she secretly resents having to take care of it. There isn't time for us to think about any of these. Number 4. Soulish domination. I'm not allowed to discuss the distinction between the spirit and the soul. Nonetheless, a lot of people use what I refer to as soul thoughts or soulish dominance to dominate and manipulate other people. In modern American culture, the most prevalent instance is of a mother controlling her kids, particularly her boys. The Jewish community once had a best-selling book called How to Be a Good Jewish Mother. A lesson that was covered was how to get your son to play his violin in public, using no other motivation but guilt. If you are familiar with Yiddish yamamo, then they are the ideal illustration of what I mean. You may recall the woman who yelled, "Is there a doctor in the house?" in the large theater. One man got up and said, "Yes." "Boy, do I have a daughter for you," she exclaimed. However, it goes much beyond that. I've seen prosperous businessmen, bank presidents, and such individuals who, because they were still attached to their mother's umbilicus, never reached emotional maturity. The spiritual tie had never been severed. Their strategies for deceit are limitless. When something went wrong, the mother who ruled her family came to mind because she would have headaches. The entire family was told to keep quiet and to tiptoe around since the mother was having another headache. She suffered from headaches, which prevented them from doing anything she didn't want them to do. Here, dominate and manipulate are two nasty words. You have encountered the devil wherever you go. Number 5. Pressures in early childhood. I've found that a child's emotional and spiritual barriers are insufficient to fend off constant demonic pressure. James 3:16 makes a point that is important to remember. James 3:16. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. Children will so naturally be vulnerable to demonic influence in situations where there is a climate of conflict and discord between the parents. I would estimate that over 90% of kids are unable to keep them out. According to my observations, 80% of demon problems originate before the age of 5, and you realize that the parents are to blame for that circumstance. Number 6. Moment or place of weakness. Either physical or emotional weakness may be the cause. A terrible car catastrophe unfolds in front of a woman who is standing on a street corner. She comes into contact with the fear spirit. Or a woman has a single child. I have actually handled cases like this. A 5-year-old youngster lost his life. She experiences a depressive episode that lasts for years. She has become vulnerable to the grieving spirit, which is a very strong spirit. Alternatively, a woman may be engaged to be married, but have the engagement terminated at the last minute. She gives in to the disappointed spirit and lives a life devoid of meaning. Once, while I was teaching somewhere, a Pentecostal woman who was highly spiritual was seated in the front row. It was I who gave the spirit of disappointment its name. I observed her expression. It seized up. She completely changed. Her entire demeanor transformed till she was freed from that sense of letdown. Should you place your hopes in something and it fails, you've most likely come into contact with a malevolent energy. Physical weakness is another type of weakness. I'll give you an illustration. I have mentioned that an evil spirit can occasionally cause epilepsy. My first wife and I adopted a girl who was approximately 18 years old a few years ago. I had given her my tapes. Despite having a verified epileptic diagnosis and being on medication, she thought it was the work of an evil spirit. She came to us in need of salvation. After praying for her, Lydia and I sensed that the spirit had left her. However, it felt as though the Lord was telling me that my work wasn't done. Now tell me, how did this start? I asked the girl. Was there a bodily injury at first? Yes, the seizures began after I was hit in the head by a baseball. The physical injury was purely physical, but it allowed a spirit of epilepsy to enter, I murmured. Recognize. Her brain injury was the source of her frailty. I said, I believe the spirit has gone out. We need to close the door. So Lydia and I touched her and prayed for her brain to mend. After that, I stayed in touch with her for almost 3 years. She stopped taking medicine and never experienced another seizure. However, I only offer that as an illustration of a single instance or weak point. Number 7. Sinful acts or habits. You may be confident that an immoral habit you continue to indulge in will eventually turn demonic. An illustration of a wicked deed. I was forced to offer prayers for a young lady who had seen The Exorcist. Her instinct told her not to go. She stepped out, and something came in. She had to come, own her transgression of entering prohibited land, and then receive her deliverance. Alternatively, if someone watches a pornographic film, a lust demon or other form of sex demon may appear. But unless you acknowledge the transgression that allowed the devil to enter your life, you will not be freed.